Tell me, I demanded, my voice wavering between sorrow and fury. How could you both let this happen? How could you hide this secret, allowing our life to be nothing more than an elaborate lie? Sebastien attempted to interject his tone, pleading, Anya, it wasn't what you think. I remember the gentle hum of a quiet morning in rural France. At the time, I had every reason to be happy. My husband Sebastien exuded charm and sophistication. To the outside world, he was the epitome of success and grace, a man who never failed to draw smiles and admiration wherever he went. In our shared sanctuary, his laughter mingled with mine like an intricate duet, and his eyes filled with promises of adventures and affection held me captive in a dream of forever. Alongside him stood Camille, my dearest friend since childhood, whose loyalty and gentle kindness had been the cornerstone of my existence. Yet even in those idyllic days, subtle hints began to weave a tapestry of uncertainty around our little haven. One late autumn afternoon, as the rain drizzled softly on cobblestone streets, and I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I noticed something peculiar. Sebastien's phone vibrated incessantly, its screen lighting up in the dim room. I glanced up, curious, but dismissed it as merely another work message, nothing more. Yet in the fleeting moment of that silent observation, a tiny seed of doubt sprouted quietly in the recesses of my mind. I told myself that love demanded no suspicion, that trust was the very foundation of our blissful life. And so I pushed the thought away, letting it dissolve like mist under the morning sun. Days flowed into one another with the same comforting monotony, but shadows occasionally danced on the fringes of my contentment. I would catch a glimpse of Sebastien exchanging a brief, almost furtive glance on the phone, or hear a snippet of a conversation in tones too hushed to decipher. Yet I clung to my idealism, believing that love could weather even the smallest storm. Camille, too, sometimes wore expressions that left me wondering. In her gentle smiles, a flicker of something unspoken, perhaps a trace of envy or hidden sorrow, would pass before she quickly masked it with her habitual warmth. I attributed these fleeting moments to the pressures of everyday life, convincing myself that our lives were too precious to be marred by needless suspicions. I vividly recall one particular evening that remains etched in my memory. We had decided to dine outdoors at a small bistro nestled on the edge of the village. The sky was a canvas of twilight hues, and the air was cool yet inviting. Conversation flowed easily, laughter filling the spaces between words. I found myself gazing at Sebastien, admiring the way his eyes sparkled when he spoke about his latest business ventures, and at Camille, whose attentive gaze made me feel both cherished and observed. Yet beneath that harmonious exchange, a dissonant note resonated in unexplainable tension that I couldn't quite name. Isn't it strange, I mused aloud as we walked back along a winding lane, how sometimes a moment of silence holds more meaning than words ever could? Perhaps Sebastien replied with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. There's always more beneath the surface than our minds can fathom. Camille's response was a soft laugh laced with an edge, as if she held a secret too precious to confess. I couldn't help but notice the rapid beat of her pulse in her flushed cheeks when she nodded in agreement. In that instance, the shadows of doubt took on a bittersweet melody, echoing a warning I was too naive to heed. Back at home, nestled in our comfortable yet modest abode, framed by ivy and blooming roses, routine offered solace. I busied myself writing my fingers, dancing over the keys as I poured my thoughts into words, a freelance writer's humble expression of hope and dreams. My passion was to capture the fleeting moments of beauty around me, the subtleties of human emotion, and the mystery of our intertwined lives. But even as I scribbled out ideas that celebrated life's wonder, an undercurrent of unease quietly suffused my heart. I began to notice the little details, the way Sebastien's eyes would dart away whenever I casually mentioned his work phone at dinner, or the secretive smiles he exchanged with Camille during moments when I least expected it. Once while I was in the kitchen preparing dinner, I nearly missed hearing a hushed conversation between them as they passed in the hallway. Their words were soft and indistinct, a mix of laughter and guarded tones. But what struck me most were the looks they shared afterward, as if they were silently communicating a truth far too heavy for words. Each minor irregularity was a drop in a slowly accumulating pool of uncertainty, yet I buried them behind the veil of my unwavering faith. I remember lying awake one stormy night, the rain drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof as if urging me to listen more intently. My thoughts, like restless waves, circled around images of Sebastien and Camille whispering secrets in the dark. The realization that something might be amiss gnawed at me with an unyielding persistence, even as I clutched my pillow tightly and repeated once again, "No, I must be overthinking it." Trust was sacred, and I had always believed in the benevolence of those I loved. Still, even in that tenuous state of cautious optimism, the signs refused to be silenced. It wasn't until a seemingly trivial encounter at the local market, where I saw Camille lingering near a secluded corner, her eyes flicking towards a figure half hidden in the shadows, that I felt the first undeniable sting of betrayal. The mundane chatter of vendors and the bright colors of fresh produce held no solace, as I, wrapped in my own inner tumult, returned home with a heart that both yearned for reassurance and trembled in the grip of disquiet. That evening, as dusk settled over our village, I sat by the window watching the interplay of light and shadow in our garden. The wind carried whispers from far-off places, echoes of secrets waiting to be unraveled, and I could not help but wonder if the harmony of my life was nothing more than a fragile facade. In those quiet moments, the idyllic life I had always known began to tarnish under the weight of uncertainty. My heart, so full of love and trust, trembled with the slightest hint of foreboding, an omen of a storm that was yet to break. I closed my eyes and sought solace in the familiar cadence of my own breathing, attempting to convince myself that these unsettling feelings were but fleeting illusions born out of mundane coincidences. Yet deep within, the echo of suspicion resonated louder with each passing day. Even as I clung to the remnants of idealism, another more somber realization was slowly dawning on me, that sometimes even the purest love might conceal layers of secrets waiting for the moment when the truth inevitably surfaces. And so life trudged on in that delicate balance of light and shadow, a false peace that belied the hidden fractures beneath. In the stillness of rural evenings and the vibrant hues of transient sunsets, I remained blissfully unaware of the tempest that lay in wait, a storm destined to unravel everything I held dear. Yet a part of me could not ignore the persistent whisper of my intuition, urging me to look closer, to listen harder, and to prepare for the inevitable moment when the facade would finally shatter. Every smile exchanged, every whispered word between Sebastien and Camille held a secret message that my heart struggled to decode. And though I longed to believe in the sanctity of trust and the enduring promise of love, the first tremors of betrayal had begun to disturb my world. In that fragile moment between night and day, as I sat in solitude with my thoughts echoing in the silence, I felt the unmistakable stirrings of a truth I was not yet ready to face. Little did I know that the gentle murmurs of doubt would soon crescendo into a revelation that would forever alter the course of my life, an echo of betrayal that would demand to be acknowledged, no matter how heart-wrenching the cost. I awoke to a world that no longer felt like mine. The lingering warmth of previous days had given way to an icy dread that seeped into every corner of my being. In the hours following that restless night, I resolved to unearth the secrets hidden behind the smiles and whispered assurances. The shadow of doubt no longer could be ignored. It demanded to be confronted, no matter how it might shatter the fragile illusions I had so dearly clung to. My investigation began in whispers and furtive glances. I found myself sneaking into the quiet study late one evening when the house lay steeped in slumber, and the only sound was the steady patter of rain against the window panes. I had always trusted Sebastien implicitly, yet now my fingers trembled as I rifled through piles of neatly arranged papers and forgotten mementos. It was there, between an overdue bill and the remnants of an old journal, that I discovered an envelope, its cream-colored paper stained by the faint scent of jasmine, unmistakably Camille's perfume. The envelope's seal was broken, and inside lay a letter that pierced my heart with the precision of a sharpened blade. As I unfolded the fragile page, each word burned itself into memory. My dearest Camille, even now as darkness encroaches upon us, I find solace in the light of your love. You are my secret hope, my constant in this unyielding world. Soon our future will take form, a life together symbolized by the promise of new beginnings and a child who will bind our fates. The tender promises, the desperate yearning, and the mention of a future I had never imagined, they dovetailed into a revelation that left me numb. My mind raced the truth, coalescing into a singular, painful focus. Sebastien and Camille had conspired to create a life unbeknownst to me, built on whispered lies and midnight rendezvous. Consumed by the urgency of this new reality, I began searching for more evidence. In the muted glow of my cell phone, I found messages that spoke in a language of secrecy and intimacy, a string of texts exchanged between Sebastien and an unknown contact, their words dripping with passion and deceit. Each notification felt like a hammer blow, each message a testament to a betrayal that had been patiently unfolding before my eyes while I remained ensconced in blissful ignorance. The inevitable confrontation came on a night when the storm outside seemed to echo the turbulence inside me. Rain lashed against our home as if nature herself had turned her face against the treachery concealed within these walls. I gathered the shards of courage I had left and summoned Sebastien and Camille to join me in the living room, a room that once had sounded with laughter and soft conversation, but now bristled with an electric tension that promised reckoning. Standing in the center of that familiar space, my heart pounded so violently I feared it might shatter completely. Sebastien's eyes, once warm and inviting, now darted around as though searching for an escape. Camille's usually gentle gaze was clouded with apprehension, and something else, a silent confession of guilt, perhaps even regret. I could no longer contain the torrent of feelings crashing over me. "Tell me," I demanded, my voice wavering between sorrow and fury. "How could you both let this happen? How could you hide this secret, allowing our life to be nothing more than an elaborate lie?" Sebastien attempted to interject his tone. Pleading, "Anya, it wasn't what you think." But his words were drowned out by the pounding of my heart and the howling wind outside. The rain hammered the windows as if urging me to press on, to force the truth into the light. Camille stepped forward hesitantly, her eyes glistening with tears. "Anya, I've been tormented by this secret for so long. I loved Sebastien in a way I never should have, a passion born from envy of what you possessed, your unwavering light, your idealism. I saw in you a purity that mired me in my own darkness, and I sought to claim part of that light for myself." Her voice broke as she continued. "I thought that if I could be with him, maybe I could escape the shadows that followed me. But it wasn't just lust. It was a twisted kind of love nurtured over years of silent longing and regret. Every word cut deeper than the last. I recalled all the small inconsistencies, the whispered phone calls, the furtive glances, the moments when I felt I wasn't truly seen by the very people I trusted most. My mind reeled as I tried to comprehend the magnitude of their deception. Sebastien's expression, once so full of charm and assurance, now crumpled into that of a man consumed by guilt and desperation. Tears blurred my vision as I forced myself to ask the question whose answer I dreaded more than anything. And the letters, the promises of a future, the mention of a child, were those lies as well? Sebastien's silence was more damning than any words. Finally, his voice was mere whispers. I am expecting a child, Anya. It's been so long coming, and He broke off, unable to complete the confession that now seemed to hang in the air like a malediction. The room grew unbearably small as each revelation unfurled. The thunder outside collided with my inner tumult. I felt as though not only had the very fabric of my love been shredded, but the identity I had built around trust and hope was evaporating into the storm. The reality before me was no longer the story I had written with so much optimism. It was a cruel narrative of betrayal and shattered dreams. In that charged moment, Camille's confession spilled forth, her voice trembling with anguish and a bitter sincerity. I never meant for it to hurt you this way. I was in love not with the man you married, but with the idea of what he represented. I envied your simplicity, your belief in love's power. I cornered myself into a choice I can no longer undo. My own words escaped in a strangled whisper. All my life I believed that trust was unbreakable. How do I reconcile the love I had with the lies you've woven around me? As lightning illuminated the room, each flash revealed the raw, unguarded pain etched in the faces of those I once held dear. The storm's relentless fury was a macabre mirror of my inner collapse, a symphony of clashing emotions that drowned out reason and left only the bitter taste of betrayal. I felt as though the world had grown cold, my dreams turned to ash beneath layers of deceit. The accusations, the stifled apologies, and the torrential outpouring of grief mingled with the relentless sounds of the storm. In that tumultuous clash, every detail, the bitter scent of rain-soaked earth, the specter of love twisted into revenge, and the stark realization that my life would never be the same, resounded with an agonizing clarity. I could no longer deny that the beliefs I once held about love might have been mere fragile constructs destined to crumble under the weight of harsh truth. In that final shattering moment, as the storm raged both outside and within, I understood that this confrontation was not merely about exposing a betrayal, it was a reckoning of my own illusions. The unassailable faith I once had in the sanctity of our life was now a wreckage strewn across the floor, a broken dream I would have to piece together in solitude. With a final pained glance at Sebastien and Camille, two figures whose presence had once promised me a perfect sunlit future, I turned away, stepping into the relentless rain. Each drop felt like a caustic reminder of the truth that now lay bare, that even the most cherished bonds can harbor secrets so dark they change us irrevocably. I left that night with the storm as my only companion, my mind adrift in a sea of sorrow and newfound resolve. I could no longer stand within those walls where every whispered memory and every silent touch bore testimony to a love that had betrayed me. And though every step felt as if I were trudging through shards of broken glass, I knew that this painful, unvarnished truth was the first step toward reclaiming my life, even as I stood at the precipice of an uncertain future. The truth, harsh and unyielding as it was, had stripped me of the innocence I once took for granted. In that moment, I vowed to honor the memory of the love I had believed in, even if it now lay tarnished, and to forge a path towards healing and ultimately self-redemption. The echoes of that night would haunt me for years to come, but they would also be the catalysts of my rebirth. I left home with nothing but a few belongings, my heart still pounding with the remnants of that terrible confrontation. The storm had passed, but the chill it left behind seeped into my bones. I wandered aimlessly through the narrow lanes of our village, each step a mixture of resolve and sorrow, as if the earth itself mourned the decay of the sanctity I once knew. That night, I slept in a small guest house on the outskirts, a humble refuge that allowed me a few moments of respite. In those quiet hours when the world seemed to hold its breath, I began to piece together the fragments of my shattered life. I reached out to my family, hesitant and unsure, yet desperate for answers that might make sense of the chaos. My mother's familiar, soft voice came as a balm to my raw wounds. Over cups of tea in her modest kitchen, she listened intently as I recounted the betrayal, my words trembling with emotion. With tearful eyes, she admitted that nothing in life was ever as simple as it appeared, and that sometimes the sins of the past cast long shadows on the present. It was during one of these long, sleepless nights that I decided to revisit the old family estate, a place filled with memories and secrets alike. The mansion, with its ivy-covered walls and creaking floors, had witnessed generations of love and loss. Among the dusty relics in a forgotten trunk, I discovered a bundle of letters tied with a faded ribbon. As I unfolded a yellowed envelope, I recognized my mother's delicate handwriting. The words within painted a picture of a secret long buried before the life I knew was built on promises my mother and my father had been entangled in a delicate romance with echoes of a forbidden liaison. More startling was the revelation that Camille's family had once shared an intimate connection with mine, a bond forged in a time of vibrant passion, only to be severed by circumstances too painful to discuss. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. The betrayal I was facing was not a random act of treachery, but a patterned repetition of scars passed down through generations. The letters revealed that Camille's mother and my father had shared a fleeting yet profound connection that had been hidden away to protect reputations and fragile familial bonds. Suddenly, the forces that had driven Camille to seek solace in forbidden love with Sebastien began to coalesce into a tragic, intertwined destiny. The past, I realized, was not so neatly separated from the present. Emotions swirled inside me. Anger, heartache, but also a burgeoning understanding that betrayal could spring from the same roots as love, twisted and warped by time and circumstance. Haunted by this newfound knowledge, I sought guidance beyond the familiar faces of my family. I found myself drawn to a small, weathered chapel on the hillside, a place that had always exuded a quiet spirituality. There I met an elderly caretaker whose presence was as soothing as the first light of dawn. Over a simple meal in a dimly lit room lined with ancient icons, he spoke of life's inevitability of suffering as an integral part of the human condition. "We are all but actors on a stage," he told me quietly, "bound by threads of destiny that often weave patterns we cannot comprehend. Pain, betrayal, and even love, they are all parts of the same tapestry." His words resonated with a mysterious clarity. I began to see that my path to healing would not lie in the pursuit of revenge alone, but in understanding the complexities that led us all to this point. This epiphany did not erase the agony of betrayal, but it offered a glimmer of hope, a way to reclaim the narrative of my life, by acknowledging that every scar was a story, every wound a lesson. Empowered by this perspective, I decided to confront the tangled web of the past. I revisited old photographs, spent long hours tracing the lineage of my family, and even reached out to a few distant relatives who held fragmented memories of our intertwined histories. Piece by piece, the mosaic of betrayal and secret passion formed a picture more intricate than I had ever imagined. My heart, once heavy with the burden of a single betrayal, now held space for a deeper, more nuanced understanding of human frailty. I began to see that though Sebastien and Camille had chosen their path in hurtful ways, their actions were entangled with forces beyond their control, a legacy of old wounds and unspoken promises. One crisp autumn afternoon, I found myself at the very edge of the river that ran past the old estate. The water, a mirror reflecting the muted colors of a fading sunset, reminded me of life's ceaseless flow. In that moment of solitude, I whispered a silent farewell to the tempest of my past, a determined promise to seek healing rather than endless retribution. I knew then that this journey was not about erasing the pain, but transforming it into a source of strength and wisdom. My tentative steps along the riverbank felt like the first strides toward a future yet unwritten. In time, the raw edges of my grief began to soften into an ache that was both bittersweet and instructive. I started writing again, filling page after page with the intricate details of my quest, the sights, sounds, and voices that shaped this internal odyssey. My writing became both catharsis and confession, a testament to the reality that even in the face of betrayal, one could find a way to rebuild a life imbued with purpose and resilience. Yet as I allowed myself to embrace this newfound understanding, the question of forgiveness, or the decision not to remain a constant, echoing under the vast canopy of my soul. I recalled the words spoken during that fierce confrontation, the desperate glances exchanged between Sebastien and Camille, and the tormented plea in their voices. I realized that forgiveness was not an obligation, nor was it a simple act of absolution. It was a process, a slow and deliberate shedding of old skins to make way for growth. For the first time, I accepted that my journey might lead me not to a simplistic reconciliation, but to a richer, more compassionate perspective on the imperfections of love. As days turned into weeks, I danced with the delicate balance of letting go and holding on. recognizing that the memories of betrayal might never completely vanish, but they could be transformed into wisdom and strength. I began to envision a future where I could write not just the sorrowful verses of a broken heart, but also the triumphant refrains of a soul rediscovered. I allowed the river's steady flow to remind me that healing was not a linear process, but an ever-evolving journey marked by moments of painful insight and quiet epiphanies. In the quiet solitude of that winding road toward healing, I made a decision, a pledge to honor my own resilience and to redefine the meaning of love in my life. I would not let the betrayal of Sebastien and Camille dictate the rest of my days. Instead, I would forge a new chapter, one where the scars became symbols of strength rather than emblems of defeat. Whether forgiveness would ever come fully or remain a faded memory was a question I left suspended in time. For now, I chose to focus on my own rebirth, on the art of transforming grief into the raw materials of creativity and self-realization. I clutched the bundle of old letters close to my chest as I walked back along the riverbank, the twilight deepening around me. The legacy of past loves and betrayals had left its indelible mark on my soul, yet it also paved the way for a future brimming with potential. I had stepped away from a life defined by secrets and lies and toward one illuminated by the bittersweet radiance of truth. And as I took those careful, determined steps into an uncertain tomorrow, I whispered to the night, I am more than this pain. I am the architect of my own destiny. Thus, amid the murmuring of ancient trees and the gentle lapping of water against the shore, my journey of healing truly began, a journey in which I would come to learn that the deepest wounds, when embraced fully, could be the very cradles of transformation. I emerged from the tempest of betrayal and grief into a quiet dawn that promised both solace and rebirth. In the weeks that followed the shattering confrontation, I found myself drawn almost magnetically to the very elements that had witnessed my suffering: the gentle murmur of the river, the soft rustle of autumn leaves, the aroma of lavender that clung in the air like a long-forgotten lullaby. Each day, as the sky painted itself in hues that ranged from sorrowful grays to luminous golds, I began to rebuild the mosaic of my self piece by fragile piece. Returning to my writing was the first step in reclaiming my inner voice. Once my fingertips danced lightly over pristine pages as I wrote enchanting tales of a hopeful world. Now they pressed hard against the keys as I poured raw, unfiltered emotion into every word. I chronicled the chapters of my despair and the hints of hope that emerged like fragile sparks amid darkness. In these solitary moments, the pain of betrayal transformed into art, and art in turn became my medicine. I discovered that every wound could serve as fertile ground for growth, and every scar a testament to the strength I had summoned from within. I remember a particular afternoon when I found refuge in a small, sunlit cafe tucked away on a cobblestone street. As I sat by the window, watching the interplay of light and shadow on the passerbys' faces, an older gentleman approached my table. His eyes, warm and knowing, silently acknowledged the turbulence I carried. "Miss," he began softly, "it seems you have witnessed a great storm within your life." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply. I nodded, feeling as though he were reading the secret script of my heart. "The storm has passed," I managed to say, "but its rain has left marks that I'm learning to cherish. The lessons, not just the hurt." He smiled gently and replied, "Forgiveness, if it ever comes, isn't a pardon given to another, it's a grace you extend to yourself. Nurture that grace, and you may yet find that your heart has room for light even after enduring the longest shadow." His counsel, like a tender caress, reminded me that forgiveness was not a forced absolution, but a gradual, intimate unveiling of self-compassion. As I sipped my coffee, the bitter tang slowly softened into a delicate warmth, mirroring the hard-won tenderness I was beginning to offer myself. On another crisp morning, I ventured back to the place that had once cradled my idealized dreams and nurtured my disillusionment, the old family estate. The ivy-clad walls and weathered windows seemed to whisper memories of forgotten joys and hidden sorrows. Walking through the overgrown garden, I paused by the ancient oak under which I once confided my wildest wishes. The ground softened by time, and rain bore witness to the many seasons of life passed in both happiness and heartache. Here, with every cautious step, I allowed my heart to speak to the past without being shackled by it. I realized that the estate was not a mausoleum of lost ideals, but a sanctuary of lessons learned, a canvas on which the complexities of love, betrayal, and forgiveness had been meticulously painted. The revelations of family secrets had darkened my initial view of abandonments and deceptions, yet they also offered clarity. I came to understand that the threads of our souls are woven with shared histories, often more intricate than simple notions of betrayal. Our lives, it seemed, were not linear stories of right and wrong, but expansive epics filled with unanswered questions, bittersweet truths, and the potential for redemption. This awareness did not so much erase the scar as it transformed it into a sacred emblem of endurance. In the quiet of those reflective moments, I began to see how I might redefine love for myself, a love that acknowledged the past without being imprisoned by it. I immersed myself in the rhythms of daily life, strolling along the riverbank as the water whispered ancient secrets, tending to a small garden that blossomed under my care, and reconnecting with old friends who had always seen the quiet strength underneath my fragile exterior. Their words echoed in heartfelt laughter, and gentle embraces rekindled a sense of belonging that had long been overshadowed by betrayal. One evening, as twilight deepened to a soft indigo and the stars began to peer curiously through the darkening sky, I sat down to write what would become my final entry of that tumultuous chapter. With trembling hands, I addressed a letter neither to Sebastien nor Camille. This was a letter to myself. I recounted every incision of pain, every moment of despair, and every spark of hope that had emerged from the ruins of my past. In these lines, I vowed to honor my journey by embracing my own resilience, accepting that forgiveness might one day find its way into my heart, not as an obligation to them, but as a liberating gift to myself. I left the letter unsent, a symbolic gesture of releasing the need for external closure. Instead, I sealed it and tucked it away in a leather-bound journal along with my other writings that had borne witness to my metamorphosis. Every word I had written had transformed my grief into a narrative of growth. Every sentence was a step away from the confines of the past and toward a future replete with uncertain yet undeniable promise. In those final days of my sojourn at the old estate, I often wandered alone, accompanied only by the soft echo of my footsteps on mossy stones. In these solitary journeys, I reconciled with the paradox that the end of one chapter only heralded the beginning of another. I no longer viewed the betrayal as an all-consuming darkness, but as a catalyst that propelled me to discover the vast spectrum of my own capacity for love and forgiveness, an inner wellspring that might one day overflow with a gentle, enduring light. Approaching this new horizon, I realized that I was no longer the naive girl who had once believed merely in the beauty of a flawless love. Instead, I had become a woman tempered by life's harshest lessons, yet unbowed and brimming with the courage to reinvent my own story. Whether or not I ever fully forgave Sebastien or Camille would remain a tender mystery, a question posed not to their actions, but to my own journey of healing. I understood now that forgiveness did not erase the past. It transformed it into a testament of survival and self-discovery. As I closed my journal and gazed out at the steady march of time, I marveled at the delicate interplay of sorrow and hope that had given rise to my rebirth. The taste of loss was no longer bitter. It had mellowed into an intricate flavor that spoke of experience and the enduring power of change. In that open starlit moment, I made a quiet promise to myself to continue living with authenticity, to seek beauty in both the fractured and the whole, and to dare to love again with myself foremost among the recipients. Now, amid the gentle embrace of night and the soft murmur of a world that kept turning, I stepped forward into an uncertain but hopeful tomorrow. I carried with me not only the echoes of revenge and the sting of betrayal, but also the truth of my own strength, a truth illuminated not by the light of forgiveness alone, but by the radiant wisdom born of every tear, every scar, and every whispered promise of a life reclaimed. In the vast tapestry of existence, I had learned that every end is but a quiet prelude to a new beginning, and in that revelation, I found the courage to not only survive, but truly live.